Welcome students, welcome to this presentation on an introduction to game theory. This is especially for students who are pursuing post-graduation in economics or other postgraduate courses where economics is a subject, and also for those who are in the corporate sector who need to understand the elementary theory of games. We know that oligopoly firms face uncertainty when they have to take a decision because they do not know what is going to be the reaction of the competitors if they take a decision, and all these arises because there is this interdependence of firms. So any action taken by this firm will influence the other firm to take another action corresponding to this. So these kind of action reaction making is not possible for firms to actually analyze them using the traditional tools of analysis like what we have done, the collusive oligopoly or the non-collusive oligopoly. These models explain to us how these activities happen or arise in a firm and how firms can have certain outcome, but we do not know how the decision making process happens to arrive at the outcomes that we saw. There are models that come from the industrial economics area, like limit pricing methods, managerial models, and behavioral models. But they too don't explain this decision making process. So there is a completely different way of understanding the oligopoly behavior, and we call that the theory of games. The theory of games itself has got a very old history, and you'll appreciate why I'm giving you this history. The old writings of Descartes, Darwin, Bernoulli, Bayes, very old writings of that. Then you have the modern game theory, which is the outgrowth of three seminal work. The first seminal work is that of Augustin Cournot, which we had discussed in an earlier video, and that in some way had its result in the Nash Equilibrium, as we see later. We also see Edgeworth's two-person competitive equilibrium. Then the M.L. Borrell's 1921, he used poker and addressed problems of bluffing and second guessing the opponent in a game of imperfect information like that of poker. Poker is a card game and much popular today. Let's now look at the modern methodological framework that is used to understand this game theory. John von Neumann, The Theory of Parlor Games, written in 1928, but the idea itself was often for a very long time. Then, much later, in collaboration with Morgenstern, Oscar Morgenstern, Neumann and Morgenstern together write Of Games and Economic Behavior in 1944 and applied the Neumann's theory of games of strategy. This was published in the early book was published in 1928. What did they make this theory based on? They believed or they observed that economics is much like a game, and firms behave like they play games, and where participants are anticipating the move of the other one. Now, game in real life, we know that there are players and who have got objectives and the strategies to win. So in economic decisions also there is a game that is played, and the objective is of course to win. As rational decision makers, the objective is to win. This idea of Neumann and Morgenstern was further developed by Martin Schubeck in 1959 in a book called Strategy and Market Structures. He was a mathematician. Again, before that, in 1951, John Nash developed game theory tools known as the Nash Equilibrium of a strategic game in 1951. Thereafter, what we interestingly find is from the period 1994 to 2014, we find that there were 12 leading economists and scientists who have been awarded Nobel Prize in Economics Sciences for their contribution to this idea of game theory. So this is the reason that little bit of history will tell you how an idea was so powerful, so important in describing this decision making process, that it took so many years of work on that. Yet we find that work is going on, and the Nobel Prize, 12 economists who have been working on that for some time, they have been awarded the Nobel Prize. To that extent, this subject is so important in the field of economics and industrial economics. Now, what is this game theory? Game theory is essentially a mathematical concept and uses probability theory to explain human behavior in a variety of contexts. Variety of context that arises from the household behavior, from the government behavior, from the nation's behavior. In all of these contexts, there is a need to understand the way we probably might behave. Now, there is a need to formulate the right strategy to succeed when we are confronted with complex challenges. So, there are day to day challenges happening at the household level, at the national level, at the international level, and there is a need to find ways, find strategies to overcome those kind of situations that arise. Now, there are situations where decision making can be independently done, and there are situations where the decisions are interdependent, where one decision we take will have a corresponding action by the other. So its application, this game theory's application is very wide. We find besides economics, it is used in sociology, it is used in psychology, it is used in philosophy, in political science, in biology. So it has got a very wide application, because in all of these social sciences we find that it is answering the complex human mind and the way decisions are taken by people in a social setting. Of course, biology is different. Why is this game theory important? Why did it get so much of recognition in the Nobel Prize winning of economics? It is a study formally of cooperation and conflict. This is the whole story of oligopoly. We have understood that all through when we were discussing the collusive oligopoly, we found that there are issues of cooperation at times and there are issues of conflict at other times. So game theory studies that aspect of oligopolistic firm behavior. It also can be used to analyze several day-to-day life examples that occurs in the world. It could be the arms race that happens. It could be the optimal policy that political parties may choose to put up candidates, or strategies to release their manifestos that we see when and how. Then we can also see it can be about the vaccination policy. Even now we can see how this game theory is being used. You can use game theory to explain this vaccination policy, where the government has a decision that it has taken, and once a decision is taken, how are the consumers behaving, and how are the private firms behaving, how are the opposition behaving, how are the nations of the world behaving to a decision taken by the government. So these kind of decisions, once they're taken, they can have a variety of responses from the various stakeholders. Now, it means that when a policy is taken, there is a lot of thought that goes in to come to the kind of decision which could harm or have the least harmful effect. So, vaccine hesitancy is one of those outcomes that we see when the need of the hour is to vaccinate people, but there are people who are hesitant to take the vaccination. So, how do we understand this kind of situation? We can also see whether the government should regulate or not regulate firms to carry out certain kinds of activities. It should be in today's context again. Would the government, how much would the government penalize people for not wearing masks, for example? If it is too high, if it is too low, should it be just left without monetary penalty? Should it be just by advertising this idea? Should it be just by nudging people to wear them? So there are different options that are available. So that is how these kind of human minds work, and that is where this kind of game theory knowledge can help in taking decision. It can also tell you, if your firm is going to decide a particular action, what kind of a response will your rival firm take up. Uh, then it can also tell about the salaries that firms are to give to their employees. It in the context again today we have the work from home scenario. So the question is, how much should they be paid because they do not come to work, or if they do not pay a certain amount, will that workers continue to be with them, or they will jump ship and go to other firms? What will it be? What kind of a loss will the firm incur if the skills are to be honored by the wages that they have to pay, and a series of associated activities. It could also be on the many decision making that families take in terms of marriages, in terms of relationships, and so on. So, in all areas of social life, we find that there are games being played, and these games in that language, there are games being played, and there is a need to know how actually this mind works. So when I come to the application of the game theory to oligopoly, I would list a series of activities that oligopoly firms have to take decision on, and that is where the game theory will be helpful to these kind of firms. So whatever action is going to be taken by the firm, it has to be specifically designed. It has to be specifically stated. What is it that it wants to take? What is the specific course of action it wants to take? And for that specific course of action, what is the policy it is going to have? And for that policy, what is the value of that policy variable? So the firm has to decide beforehand, it has to come to a conclusion on what is the value of that policy variable it will work towards. For example, if it wants to increase its sales, then what is the amount of sales that it has to increase? The firm may have to take decisions on price and output, whether to raise the price, whether to lower the price, whether to keep the price as it is. This is a decision that the firm will have to take about price. It could be about products, that it could be about keeping the existing products, creating new products, or even exiting some products from the market. We have seen that many of the products that are there in the market are available for a while, especially in the technology sector. We find that after some time that particular product is no longer available, and with that, that firm has stopped manufacturing them. So how do firms come to these kind of decisions of products? It could be on advertising. Should they advertise for a new product, for an existing product, for an for a product that is going to be exited sometime? Then what should they increase the advertising charges? Should they maintain the advertising, or should they decrease the advertising allotment for these kind of activities? That is another area that oligopoly firms have to constantly do, because they come under the non-price segment of attracting consumers. We also find whether the firms have to decide whether they want to share more profits with the shareholders. Do they want to get a greater market share, or do they want to have their chances of survival increase, or do they want to merge with another firm, or do they want to purchase another firm? All these are decisions which cannot be done just in the plain way. So this requires a lot of action and counteraction, understanding about how the rival firms can behave. So we have heard about many decisions where the firms actually come to a decision of merger or an acquisition, and at the last stage it doesn't work. So how do these kind of decisions happen? What is the thought that goes in behind understanding these kind of behavior of firms? So the firm will try and adopt that situation, that decision which is most advantageous for the given situation and the given circumstances. Now let's see what are the elements of game. The game theory itself is a very complex, highly mathematical subject, and what I will do here is give you the important concepts that are involved with this game theory, so that you have a fair idea of this game theory, and I leave it to you to the rest of the story. So let me just introduce you to the various terms that are used in the game theory. The first is a game. Game is the formal description of a strategic situation where there is a situation, strategic decision has to be taken, a decision which will affect somebody else. So a game is one firm with many firms or a single firm, whichever way. But there is a game, there is a formal, that is described in a formal way, that there is a kind of an activity that has to happen, a decision that has to be taken between different agents. Now, who are these agents? Agents are the companies, the firms, or the person or the nation on which this decision has to be based upon. And these agents have their own goals, and they have their own preferences. So it's important for a firm wanting to take a decision of that side, understand the multitudes of issues that those firms, or as a nation, for example, the vaccination, why some people are keen on vaccination, why some people are hesitant. So we need to understand these agent behavior when policies have to be made. Then we also have the utility. When a decision is taken, what is the utility of that decision? What is the payoff? What is the amount of return that will come out because of that decision? What is it that the agents will derive out of that particular action? This is called the agent payoff. We also have a strategy. Now, strategy is different from plan. It should not be mistaken for plan. Plan is something very organized. We know the resources, we know the limitations, and we fix up a plan and say these are the activities that can be done or not done. Whereas in the case of strategy, that knowledge alone is not enough. In the planning case, only that firm independently takes a decision. Whereas in the case of a strategy, it is like the game that we play, where one person plays and the other one will respond to that game. So game is between two teams. Now let me give a very simple example. Game is between two teams, a game of basketball or a game of chess or any of these things. There are two parties there, and these two parties, if one acts in a certain way, the other one will move in a certain way. So there also we can understand that there is a certain sense of strategy that is developed. So you could have a strategy, your coach and the players could have a strategic way of understanding how that game has to be played. Now, in this particular example of firm, the firms are involved with strategic thinking, in thinking about how their rival firms will behave. Now, what are the kind of strategies here? We talk about a maxi-max strategy and a maxi-minimum strategy. In a maxi-max strategy, the player attempts to earn maximum possible benefits, even if it is even if a highly unfavorable outcome is possible. So it is possible that there can be very unfavorable situation, but this agent player wants to believe that he is going to get the best outcome out of it. And it is also always seen as a naive and overtly optimistic kind of a situation, as it assumes highly favorable environment for this decision making. We also have the maxi minimum situation, where the player chooses the best of the worst of situation that is happening. So the player chooses the best of the worst of when a player cannot rely on another party to keep any agreement that has been made. So quite likely the opposite firm, though there has been an agreement, it has been flouting, it has been cheating, it has been bluffing. Then given that scenario, what is it that this particular firm would like to retrieve from that particular environment in which a decision has to be taken? There is also something called as a dominant strategy, where players employ different independent strategies to optimize their decision making with the goal of winning. So each of the player wants to do what is best for himself or herself to get winning over the opponent. So the parties involved, they want to follow a dominant, each one want to follow a dominant strategy. So the best outcome irrespective of the other player chooses. So what I choose for this game is the best I can choose irrespective of what the other person could. This is based on my understanding about how the situation would be like. One player seems to have a superior tactic regardless of how the other plays. So each one is supposed to be superior to the other in that some sense, and each one will try and plan out or theorize a strategic situation where they would be able to take a decision. There's another important term here called the payoff matrix. Now, a payoff matrix works like this. It is actually a table, and it shows what are the likely outcome of the decisions that will be taken by the firm. Now here we take two firms, and the on the horizontal axis we have firm A, and on the uh, uh, on the left we have the firm A, and on the top we have called firm B as the column. So columns have got firm B's options and rows have got firm A's option. So let us see now what happens. So we are talking about the revenue gain in rupees million. There are two firms. Now if firm A decides to advertise, what will it get? And if firm B decides to advertise, what will it get? These are the four options. So decide to advertise, not advertise by firm A. Firm B, decide to advertise and not decide to advertise. Now let's take the first row, which is the firm A decides to advertise and firm B also decides to advertise. If both the firms decide to advertise, what do we get? We get that firm A will get 20 million because of advertisement, and firm B will get 30 million because of advertisement. So they will be able to increase the revenue by 20 million by firm A and 30 million by firm B. Now take the other case when firm A decides not to advertise. When firm A decides not to advertise and firm B decides to advertise. In this particular case, what you're seeing is firm A's revenue will not change at all. It will remain at zero, but the revenue of firm B will increase by 250. So what the firm A could have also got is actually received by firm B. So the payoff is 0 for firm A and 50 million for firm B. Now take the column side for firm B. The firm B decides now not to advertise. When firm B decides not to advertise and firm A on the first row decides to advertise, so you have got a combination of advertising by firm A and not advertising by firm B, in which case firm A will get 50 and firm B will get 0. Now come to the second row. The firm B does not advertise and firm A also does not advertise. Now when both firms do not advertise, they remain in the same place without any change in their revenue. So payoff metrics is simply to put in a tabular form and see if a change is made, what kind of an outcome is expected for its own revenue and that of the revenue of the others if a particular decision is taken by the rival firm. There's another important term here called the Nash Equilibrium. There is a Nobel Prize winning John Nash. Now his movie The Beautiful Mind. Yes, solution to a game. He provides solution to a game involving two or more players who want to get the best outcome for themselves and must take action of others into account. That is what it is. Now this Nash Equilibrium idea is originally available in Kurnos of 1838, where in a very simple form he talks about the two firms deciding on the market output. So once firms reach a Nash equilibrium, both the firms cannot improve their position independently. So we saw in the Kurno model also that once the firm has reached that half and half of the market, they remain at that and they cannot change that independently. So that is the same idea that Nash entered into, to say that firms can reach this this equilibrium, and once they reach that equilibrium, they will not make changes. They cannot make changes independently. So the decision making has to involve the other one. If after reaching Nash equilibrium, they have to make a decision only by considering the other party. Now, there are several games that are used to explain Nash equilibrium. I will explain to you 2 or 3 of them, and there are several of them which I'm sure you will follow them from here. So we'll now take the very famous prisoner's dilemma. And prisoner's dilemma is about a crime that has been committed, and there are 2 persons who have been arrested by the police. However, the police does not have evidence to prove that they have committed the crime. So the police evolved at a particular plan by which they want to punish these 2 arrested people. So what the police does is, police keeps the two persons, arrested persons, at two different locations where the two persons cannot interact with each other, they do not see with each other, they do not communicate with each other. So whatever decisions they take will be decisions that are taken independently, assuming what the other person will do. Both are partners in crime, but nevertheless now they are going to face a situation where they will have to answer the police independently. Let's see how this matrix works out. So on the top, on the left, you have the prisoner A, and on the right, you have prisoner B. So the police give them options and tell them you can choose whichever options you want, and that outcome of that option you will have to go through the number of years that you will have to spend in jail. So the police tells to prisoner A and to prisoner B that if you confess, that individual A confesses independently, individual B confesses independently. If they confess, both of them confess, then both of them will get 5 years in jail. Now, the second situation the police gives them is that if you remain the firm A, if the prisoner A, if the prisoner A remains silent and prisoner B reveals the crime, then prisoner A will have to have 20 years in jail and prisoner B will be free. This is a difficult situation for this prisoner A. He has to be in jail if he doesn't, for 20 years, if he doesn't reveal the case, he doesn't confess. And what if the other prisoner B confesses and then he has no jail at all? Now, that is there are two situations there. Now, look at the other quadrant. In this particular case, firm A will, prisoner A will confess and prisoner B does not choose to confess. Well, he could do that. He can assume that he doesn't want to confess and he does not know that the prisoner A is going to confess. So if prisoner A confesses actually to the police, then prisoner A is free. He has no years of jail at all. Whereas prisoner B, who didn't confess, will get 20 years in jail. Now, these three situations are quite difficult because they have to make these choices without seeing each other. And one is to have equal jail term, 5-5, and that is if they both confess, and the other is 20 years and 0 for either of them. And the last fourth one is if both don't confess, both remain silent, it's the best thing that can do. So what will happen? Will they choose to remain silent? If they choose to remain silent, then they will have only 1 year each of jail. So in real life, it depends upon how the two persons see this outcome that will happen. So there is imperfect information there, there is uncertainty there. So to confess is the dominant strategy. Both of them feel that it is better to confess and take a 5-year term than to go for a 20-year jail term, which if I don't tell, the other person would tell and I would have to be in the jail for 20 years. And not confessing, not so sure, because that will attract a 20-year period. So both the prisoners finally on their own decide that they will reveal that they have confessed, they'll confess to the crime, and therefore they will get 5 years of jail each. So there is a set of strategies for each of the prisoner, and each prisoner finds a utility for a particular strategy, thinking about what the other prisoner is likely to do. So not necessary that they have reached an equilibrium. Not to confess is the equilibrium. Now, to confess is the dominant strategy and not necessarily the social optimum, but that is what they may choose because of the fear of the other outcome. Now, this can happen when we talk about cheating in a cartel. It can happen in a price war, and when they cheat or they bluff in a cartel, then what happens? Neither of them actually benefit from it, nor do they gain customers, and both will start earning smaller profits. So the question for them is, should they cooperate or not. But if information is symmetrical between the two, they can. But in most of the cases, information is not symmetrical, so it may not be possible to come to this kind of a conclusion. There's this famous another game called the Battle of Sexes. And in this Battle of Sexes, what happens is there is a couple, and this couple argue about how to spend their evening. So he would like to watch a movie, and she would like to go shopping. But the other side of the story is that both would not like to spend the evening alone. So one wants to go for a movie, the other wants a shopping, but both don't want to be spending the evening alone. So let us see how they would come to a situation which will give them this company, at the same time carry on what they want to do. If they go their separate ways, both don't receive any utility. And if either of them goes for the movie or the shopping, one of them will get the utility. And the knowing opponent strategy may not help. By even knowing, in this particular case, the woman knows what the man wants and the man knows what the woman wants, yet by knowing also they are not able to come to a strategy. So there is no equilibrium that they can reach in this particular game. So there are two dominant strategies. Then they use mixed strategies, probably of opponent choosing one or the other strategy and then pay it off against it. Now you can see here, for example, the man watch the movie, the woman also has to watch the movie. In which case the man, let us say, he gets 2 units of satisfaction, and the woman will get only 1 unit of satisfaction, whatever that number means. But he gets 2 units and the woman gets only one. Now the man and the woman, man watches the movie and the woman goes shopping. Now you see it is a 0-0 game, because both are doing independently and they don't have each other's company. Look at the second line, the second row, the about going to shopping. Now when he goes for shopping and woman goes for watching a movie, then they are 0-0. Both of them have no benefit out of that thing, so they are not going to be enjoying each other's company. And the last one is that she goes shopping, she gets 2 units of satisfaction, he also goes for shopping, whereas he gets 1 unit of satisfaction. So in this particular case, we know the outcomes, we know the information that one of the other would do, but yet we are not able to come to any kind of an equilibrium situation. The third one is called as matching pennies. In this matching pennies, what happens is there are two players and they place a penny on the table. So heads and tails game, and the payoff depends on whether the pennies match. If the whether the pennies match. If both the pennies are heads or both of them are tail, the first player gets to keep the pennies. If they don't match, the second player gets to keep the penny. So this is how this penny, just by head and tail, how they get it, they do this. So matching penny is a zero-sum game. If one gets it, the other one does not get it. So one player's loss is another player's gain. Both have got equal chances or equal probability of choosing heads and tails. So there is no Nash equilibrium that is possible. Neither player has an incentive to try a different strategy. The game is such that there is no other strategy possible other than to play heads and tails. Now, why are these three games being explained? These are not game theories. These are just examples of how you can show how these different respondents can behave in a given situation. There are several more, but these are the three popular ones. They just show how respondents can behave in a given situation. Now, what are the different types of games? There are the cooperative games and non-cooperative. Again, it is at a very conceptual level. So, they are the cooperative games and the non-cooperative games, where players are convinced to adopt a particular strategy through negotiations and agreements. So, in the cooperative game, the players will negotiate with each other and they will come to some kind of an agreement, some kind of a collusion that can happen among firms. And the non-cooperative firms game is when the firms or the two agents, they play their games without without any negotiation with them, and they can do that to maximize their profit. So this we saw in the non-collusive oligopoly category of Bertrand and Kurnos and Stackelbergs and all of that. They have this model of non-cooperative oligopoly, where the firms are not in discussion, not in negotiating at all. The first one is that of collusive oligopoly. Then there is the normal form and extension form games. Now, in the normal form games, where the payoff strategies, the one that we just saw, the matrix that we wrote, when the payoff strategies are written in the form of a matrix, we call it as a normal game, and the outcomes are more or less known. In the case of extension form games, there is something called as a decision tree, which is used. And if this decision is taken, this is likely to happen. If that decision is taken, then that decision will lead to further decision. You can see that little diagram there. One decision, the one problem can have two decisions. That one decision, whatever decision is taken, that decision can have two decisions. Then of that one decision, it can have further decision. So there is a need to map out possible answers that will come out of a particular decision. So this is a representation of event that can happen by chance. We also have the simultaneous and sequential move games. In the simultaneous game, the two players know, they have no knowledge about the move of the other player. So one player plays his role and the other player has to play his or her role. So in this particular case, one does the change, then only the other one gets to take the change. Like example of chess. Now, sequential games are aware of the people. They are also aware how the moves are already adopted. So, in the sequential games, we know when earlier it has happened, how this person had taken this firm had taken a decision. That is known to this particular agent. In that particular case, we call it as a sequential game. In the other one is simultaneous game, one plays and the next one plays. We also have these terms like constant sum, zero sum, and non-zero sum games. Constant sum is the sum of outcome of all the players remain constant, even if the outcomes are different. So where the players can have any number of outcomes, but their outcomes will remain the same. In that case, we call it as a constant sum game. The zero sum game is when the outcome of all the players is zero, that whatever they do, whatever decision they take, at the end of the day, nobody benefits out of that decision. It's a zero sum game. The non-zero sum game is the outcome is not zero. So they have different decisions taken, but it will not be a zero. Some benefits will be there, and the benefits will depend upon the actions of the funds, of actions of the firms. Then we also have symmetric and asymmetric games. Symmetric games are adopted by all players at the same time, and it works in the short term. In the short term, they can make decisions and the information is available, in which case we call them as symmetric games. Asymmetric games are when players make different strategies to a given complex situation that they face. So these concepts are important for us to understand in policy making. And when the governments have to make policy making, this is very useful for firms when it has to make policies, when institutions have to finalize their policy making decision. Then the knowledge of these kind of terms can help us to see when we take a decision, how are the others likely to take that decision. So it is sometimes very unexpected decision that can come out from that. Sometimes it can be a decision which can favor, but nevertheless there is a big risk in taking decisions when competitors are involved. So to understand competitor behavior in the context of individual behavior, game theory is the one that has been helping out in many disciplines, as we saw, and that is why game theory is as taught almost in all subjects, just to see how complex human behavior in society are involved in taking decisions. Of course, we also find that it is based on rationality. The whole idea of games is based on rationality. But then when we talk about rationality, it is possible that everything will be guiding towards realistic behavior. But the rationality can go to such an extent that whatever is good or whatever is bad can be told that it is because of self-interest. To that extent, this game theory has got its own limitation. Not possible all the time to be rational, and suppose somebody is influenced by a religious sentiment. In that case, a decision need not be rational. So the logic of it may be quite different in that situation than another person who takes a similar decision in a non-religious context. So we don't know how these decisions can be taken. Rationality is not always possible. And also, it is difficult to define, limit, isolate, or account for every set of activities that are likely to influence a decision. Like the decision tree that has to be made, there are so many activities that have to be thought about, to be creatively realized during the discussion processes of the firm, so that all possible outcomes can be actually assessed by the decision making firm, which is sometimes not as easy as it sounds. So firms struggle to do this, and then we also have an external element that can cause that problem. For example, a nation decides to do something very much inside the nation, but there could be a decision that is taken in another country which can influence a decision. In which case, our decisions may have been right for our present scenario, but it could be influenced by some factors which is beyond our control. So it could be the person, for example, in a firm, a decision making firm, when all the members are sitting to make a decision, it could happen that in that last scenario that one of the employees leave the organization. In that case, again, the decision making is affected by that one X factor, which is not very clear whether the firm is affected by that or not affected by that, and what can be the effect if that person leaves, and so on and so forth. So it doesn't have a complete answer like what we saw, but nevertheless, it opens up thinking, and it allows economists, policymakers, political scientists, sociologists, all of them to look at their psychologists, for example, all of them to look at the decision making process from very many outcomes possible, and the very many strategies that can be taken up to reach that possible outcome, which should be the best outcome for the agents involved. With this, we have completed the long number of presentations on the subject of oligopoly. In the next presentation, what I propose to do is to take you through a whistle-stop tour of all the markets and compare and see how these markets actually function. Then I could close this chapter's presentations on markets. Thank you. Thank you very much.